Hello and welcome to Bulimia Sucks. I'm your host, Kate Hudson-Hall, and thank you for listening. Now, this is a platform for people to share relatable and uplifting and inspiring conversations based on bulimia, anorexia, and other eating disorders. And episodes include talking with professionals who work with people with an eating disorder, who have maybe had their own struggles with an eating disorder, and also to people in general that are having a really difficult time trying to overcome their eating disorders and talking about their difficult journeys and their steps taken into recovery. Now, also, I'd like to mention my coloring books, which are out now on Amazon. So there is one for bulimia, anorexia, binge eating, and also an anxiety one. And they've got 35 plus easy to color, relaxing patterns. And they also contain a powerful quote, which is very inspiring in itself. And then on the opposite page, there's motivational questions to help you learn about yourself from that quote, and maybe what you could start to think about to change some of your behaviors. So check those out. If you put my name, Kate Hudson-Hall, into Amazon, you'll be able to find those. And also, as a therapist, I've created a free Bulimia Sucks course to help you get started on your recovery pathway. So if you go to my website, katehudson-hall.com, I have a sign-up form, so you can then sign up and check them out. Now, our guest today is Mia Findlay. So I'm very pleased that she's joining us. Mia is deeply passionate about helping others reach the same freedom she now enjoys without her eating disorder. She's worked in the eating disorders support field for 8 years and has been working with clients as a coach since launching Beyond Body, and that was in December 2018. Mia's based in Sydney and has worked closely with the Butterfly Foundation, which is Australia's leading eating disorder body, as an ambassador for 3.5 years. She takes a direct and compassionate and evidence-seeking approach. Fantastic. All the way to help you through your recovery. Mia joins a YouTube channel, well, she runs a YouTube channel and Instagram page dedicated to spreading recovery, hope, and awareness for people with eating disorders. And she's here today to share her story and how she works with her clients. So welcome, Mia. I'm so pleased you could join us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to have, all these connections all over the world when we're so very stuck where we are. It's a beautiful thing to be able to still connect and to have these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, have you got a funny story for us? Let's begin with that.
I do. So I am a fairly cautious person, someone who is fairly self-contained, I would say. And it was in my early days of recovery in my mid-20s when I was more prone to late nights and early mornings. My friends and I had a genius idea to go skinny dipping down at a beach in Rose Bay in Sydney in the wee hours of the morning. And this is something I never previously would have done, but in one of those wonderful euphoric freedom moments of recovery when I was so grateful for the ability to be with my friends and be present and be happy and, have this amazing new sense of freedom, threw caution to the wind and went with them, not realizing how close to sunrise it was. And of course, Sydney, very, very active city. So very quickly we had joggers, we had rowers, we had swimmers, we had all kinds of people very much in our surrounding. and a very tall ladder to climb to get out of this sea pool that we were in front of all of Sydney at 6 o'clock in the morning, and laughing so hard we could barely get out of the water and get ourselves up the ladder. But it was really such an incredible moment watching the sun come up over Sydney, and to be able to do something which would have been impossible even a year before, so isolated and so very unwell in my apartment, not speaking to anybody. So it was embarrassing, but happily so.
Entertaining for the swimmers, I'm sure. A nice surprise for them early morning.
Yes. Maybe not so much for the parents of the young boys in the rowboat who went past.
Oh, the young boys. Ooh, definitely an education for them.
Yes. I would say so.
Oh, that's so funny. So funny. So where would you like to begin? Maybe when you... So tell us about your journey with your eating disorder.
Sure. So I always had a very complicated relationship with my body, with food. I was a very tall kid. So I was 6 foot by the time I was 11, turning 12, and stuck out for that reason. So I was on the receiving end of some pretty unkind comments growing up about my size and my shape, and just incredibly self-conscious for as long as I can remember, having that awareness that I was different, that there was something wrong with my body. And that knowledge was sort of sitting there waiting to take hold when I went through a few very, very destabilizing events when I was about 19, and eating disorder was kind of sitting there waiting to kick off. And it first developed as binge eating disorder, which quickly became bulimia. And ultimately, I ended up with a diagnosis of anorexia binge purge subtype. So a few behavioral patterns all feeding into each other. I was 25 when I sought recovery. And it was really because I had no other option. I had tried everything other than getting help and getting better. And on the day that I went to see my psychologist, I made a video for myself on my iPad, just for me, just as a diary, to have it to look back on, marking day one, not imagining I'd get further than maybe a month. And
that's a very good idea.
I recommend it to people all the time.
Yeah,
These
absolutely.
clues that you can leave for your future self.
Yeah.
And that's really the role that played. It was a diary for me. It was, when I had light bulb moments, when I learned something really valuable in therapy, I would come home and put it on video, and started putting them on YouTube as I ran out of space on my iPad, and people found them. And
incredible. That's just such a powerful learning for others.
It was selfishly, it was so helpful to me because the comments from people who had been there were so encouraging. I'm a year further along than you are, or 6 months, or 5 years. It gets so much easier. Try this, try that. And as I got better and started finding out about the state of treatment and access to treatment, and how poorly funded eating disorder recovery is and awareness is, my channel started to turn more towards advocacy. And about 4 years ago, I heard from the Butterfly Foundation. I became their ambassador around that time. And it was around that time I found out about coaching. So got myself accredited, started my business, and we've been helping people through Beyond Body for the last 4 years to overcome their own eating disorders, all CCI certified through the Carolyn Costin Institute, and all fully recovered. So very, very full circle to get to now give back what was given to me. So,
and how rewarding to be able to help others now.
Yeah, it was probably the happiest accident of my life, putting up those videos and having that turn into this community in this space that then introduced me to these other opportunities that meant I could give back. I wouldn't wish an eating disorder on anyone, but the process of healing from it has given me far more than the eating disorder was ever able to take.
Yeah. Because for me, when I went through my eating disorder and I finally, after 15 years, got help, and found a therapist that I felt comfortable with, and she just sort of helped me to turn my life around. When I recovered and was at that point, it was like, okay, I know my goal, my direction here is I need to be able to help other people how I've been helped, because it's just so important to be able to help people, because they, they're just completely buried. Some people are buried in all of those difficult emotions, with every door is shut, but there is possibility and there is the help out there.
Yeah, I think so many of us are so motivated to give back, and more than any other area in terms of mental health awareness raising, etc. It seems that with eating disorders, people seem to be more motivated to give back than in any other area I've ever witnessed. And that's what I'm always imparting to people when I'm out talking about the need for more funding and the need for more support, is the investment is so worthwhile. These people are so worthwhile just as an individual. To invest in their healing is reason enough, but the ripple effect is endless. You look at somebody like Carolyn Costin, who was able to recover, and her ripple effect is ongoing. I have a coach in my practice who found out about coaching via my channel. So that ripple effect is ongoing. And investing in these people has the potential to have endless positive outcomes. And I think because we all feel at some point in our process, I'm not going to be able to kick this thing, I'm going to be the one who never gets better, that when you do get to the other side, there is this, I think there's this motivation to be an example to those people who have been in a similar mindset of, it's not going to be me. I thought that too. I think all of us do. I think it's a prerequisite. If you haven't had that thought, you'd be a pretty rare case.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful thing to have somebody sitting in front of you saying, that thought, I've had that feeling, I've had that, and I don't experience that anymore.
Yeah. And I think there's sort of an underlying connection there, an unconscious connection with people, because they totally understand where you are and the difficult journey that you are, that maybe you are in the depths of. And having that connection and being able to, the guidance to be able to take those steps is really so important.
It's a bit of a shared unspoken language. Even, I'll be talking to a client and I'll make a suggestion about a challenge that they might do or something they might consider, and I'll just see an eye movement and I'll go, what's that thought? I know something's going on and I'm pretty sure I could bet on what it is, but let's unpack it, because I know if someone had said that to me, what I would have thought. And we, like you said, we all have so many different experiences when it comes to eating disorders, and we must meet the individual where they are. But there is such a common thread through all of our experiences that helps us to understand each other. And it's why community is so important when it comes to healing, being able to see yourself in not just where you've been, but where you want to go as well.
Yeah. So going back to when you made that decision that you were going to see that psychologist, so do you remember what specifically sort of guided you and encouraged you to take that first step? And what would you say to others in that situation?
Well, I'm sometimes reticent to share why I recovered, because I think that it can uphold an unhelpful recovery pattern, which is that I'd really hit rock bottom. So as much as I was physically suffering, I was mentally suffering more than I was ever, physically compromised. So I'd been dealing with suicide ideation for about 12 months before I made an attempt on my life. And that is the thing that triggered my recovery and going to call my mum, going and seeing a GP, sitting in front of a psychologist, all of that happened within about 72 hours, which is not common. I didn't know that at the time, that rapid response and really positive response to help seeking is not necessarily the norm. But I also think it's important to share that because of the stereotype of eating disorders, which is that these are physical illnesses, that there needs to be, a health marker, or you need to physically deteriorate to deserve help or to be at a stage where you can get better. I was mentally compromised well before I ever would have reached a point where I was physically compromised enough for the system to really respond in an appropriate way. And I was very lucky to be pointed in the direction of a phenomenal psychologist who didn't just deal with the physical and the food. She really got to the core of why I was utilizing the eating disorder to cope, and helping me to become the person I wanted to become. It was a very values-driven interaction that we had, and it was incredibly empowering. Recovery can be extraordinarily difficult, but I found parts of it really inspiring and, like I said earlier, really euphoric, really, it just aligned with my value system so much. I love personal development. I've told every therapist I've ever seen, I will be the most willing client you ever meet. I love this stuff. I love self-exploration and understanding myself and understanding other people. And she really latched onto that. And she helped to save my life, but she also helped to shape me in a way that helped me to pursue the things that I really wanted to get out of my life, which proved very quickly that my eating disorder was not bringing me to the outcomes that it was promising. And the only way to get there was to walk in the opposite direction towards recovery. So I was very, very fortunate to have such an amazing response and support system. And it's what I hope for everyone. And I hope to get us, that we all collectively can get to the point where that is the response. People call their GP, they get in front of a psychologist, and they get appropriate treatment sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think back, what would you say to that 18-plus-year-old you? That 23-year-old you when you're in the depths of despair?
I would say do something about it now. Don't wait. This is a problem. I spent a lot of time in my eating disorder in total denial. Eating disorder awareness was not anywhere near where it is now. We didn't have an eating disorder community. There was no such thing as Instagram. There wasn't really a representation of what I was experiencing, or anyone or any level of awareness that I could access that told me that something was wrong. So I would tell myself that, any amount of suffering, whatever that looks like, makes you worthy of help, just you as you are. And that it's not going to be healed until you take action. These things, unless we repair them, they repeat. You can't think your way out of this. You can't shame your way out of it. You can't guilt your way out of it. You have to deal with it head on, and that you have the capacity to. I think we all underestimate our ability to face what is sitting underneath the eating disorder, but it's not as scary as a lifetime, if we're lucky, under the reign of an eating disorder. And that is if we are very, very lucky.
Yeah, yeah. And so, Mia, what would you advise? So say 3 to 5 key points. If somebody was going through an eating disorder, what would you advise them to sort of begin that pathway onto their recovery pathway?
The first thing I recommend to people is to give it language. Start talking about it, but talk about it in a setting where the pressure is not high, where we're not fearful of people's reactions. So something like your local eating disorder hotline. Here in Australia, it's the Butterfly Foundation. In America, it's NEDA. Have a bit of a Google. A lot of those outlets also have chat functions. So here in Australia, the Butterfly Foundation website, they actually have an online chat function, which is the most popular way for people to connect to Butterfly, just to start feeling out what it feels like to talk about this experience, and to get some guidance about what the next steps might be.
Yeah, and to hear that you're not alone, that you're not on your own with this. So many people are going through it.
Yeah. And I think that would have made a huge difference to me, having no concept of what eating disorders were outside of sort of the stereotype that we're all fed and have been fed for a long time, I didn't resonate with that stereotype. But when I found out the statistics and the breadth of all the different eating disorders, and the fact that, anorexia is actually not the image that represents the majority of eating disorders, that we have people with binge eating disorder who take up sort of that 47% of sufferers. So just being able to even get some stats and some information to help you to understand that this is an illness, this requires treatment, it is not a personal flaw, it is not a personal failing. To start looking at some really fantastic resources, which again help you to start to grasp maybe seeking help and understanding the illness itself. I can highly recommend the 8 Keys books by Carolyn Costin. There is the main book and the workbook. It is extraordinarily practical, and it is very, very compassionate and honest and direct in terms of its philosophy and approach. Like I said, just to start exploring the idea of getting help and getting your head around that, while also taking action that may not feel too intense. And most importantly, actively seeking help in treatment setting. So whether or not that is requiring inpatient, seeking out a psychologist, seeking out a dietitian, whatever that treatment makeup might be for you, if that is accessible to you, to please take advantage of whatever support you can have access to. And to know that, as you just touched on, you are not alone. There is a whole community out here of people who get it, understand it, who have been in your exact position, who have thought it is not possible for them, that they are the unicorn who will not make it to the other side. And the irony of eating disorders is that they tell us that we are all alone, and that is the one cognition we all have in common, is that we are the unicorn all alone. And to make sure that they really make the most of their support system, their resources, their community. I think that that connection is the most important thing that we can encourage people to seek out.
Yeah, yeah. And when you were going through your journey, your recovery journey, were there any specific resources that you found particularly helpful?
In terms of my journey, like I said, there were outside of my psychologist and journaling for myself online via my videos, I didn't really have an awful lot of knowledge or insight. At the time, the resources that were most available were things like eating disorder recovery memoirs, which can be helpful, but can also be harmful in that they can detail some pretty specific, unhelpful information. But certainly there were things via my psychologist that were more helpful from that memoir sort of personal lived experience perspective. But it was really later on, it was when I got my hands on the Keys books that was particularly helpful. Katie Morton on YouTube, a wonderful therapist who specializes in eating disorders, is a great resource that was very helpful to me as far as getting my head around what was sort of happening, and in a very relatable, compassionate, caring way. That's very much her approach and her style. But it was really the experiences of others and building that community and hearing from other people in the same boat. That was probably the most impactful for me, was discovering other people who were very relatable and inspiring just by their own example.
Yeah, yeah. And what does freedom mean to you now?
Freedom is being able to say yes at the last minute to a pub lunch with friends, and, just being able to look at the menu and decide what I want, based not on any rules or numbers, but just what I feel like, being able to have a glass of wine or two, and be able to just enjoy the company of the people I'm with, be present, to build memories with them that aren't partially hijacked by the constant running chatter of eating disorder in the back of my head. It's being able to move my body purely for enjoyment, or choose not to move my body because I wouldn't enjoy it. It's being able to pursue the things that I'm passionate about, that give me purpose, that are really connected to my value system and who I want to be, versus the eating disorder ideals and how it tells me or told me I was valuable and worthy, without ever making me feel valuable and worthy. Whereas these things that I pursue from a healthy perspective give me that lovely sense of accomplishment and presence and connection, and that sense of I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, doing exactly what I'm meant to be doing, as opposed to that chaotic hamster on a wheel, never getting to the finish line feeling of the eating disorder. So over so many different categories, freedom is definitely how I would define all those features of my life that used to be so dominated by the eating disorder.
Yeah. And so with regards to your coaching program, so what would be, what are the steps for people as they look into that, and, how would they begin?
So a good place to go is the Carolyn Costin Institute. In my opinion, it's the undoubtedly the best qualification we have thus far for coaching. I mean, it's such a new area, and Carolyn's done a phenomenal job putting together an incredibly rigorous course. It is not an easy course, as it shouldn't be. It involves supervision, an internship where Carolyn is supervising each of your sessions until she deems that it is appropriate for you to be working independently with clients. But to go and get a feel for what coaching is, that's a good place to start. Absolutely reaching out to us at beyondbodycoach.com. I have a number of coaches who work across a few different time zones. So we have Shelby in LA and Claire in Brussels. I'm obviously in Sydney. And putting in an inquiry with some of your details, and then we would get back to you when we have availability. And what you can really expect from coaching is, it's what I call the action stage of recovery. So it's really important that people are in a part of their recovery where they are able to set and action their goals, rather than maybe that pre-contemplative mindset. So we're really in the trenches. We're doing the stuff we need to do to get from point A to point B, which is obviously setting goals around eating regularly, adequately, and with variety, setting goals around maybe reducing movement, reducing body checking. And then throughout the week, we're providing in real-time support. So email support or text support as you're working through these goals that we've set together in session. And in the background, we're also building up and helping people to implement some healthier coping mechanisms to replace eating disorder coping mechanisms. So it's really where you develop a toolkit for the long term, not just for recovery, but most crucially, it is the doing of the thing that we need to do. We can talk about recovery all day. We can plan for recovery all day. We can contemplate and get inspiration and all that sort of stuff. But until we actually do the thing, nothing's really going to change. So it's about taking your long-term goals, and then we break them down into weekly, actionable, flexible, achievable goals, until we get you to the outcome that you want to get to, which our philosophy is full recovery. That is our goal, is to get our clients to full recovery. And I think that it's a game changer. I think it's making an enormous difference to people seeking treatment. And if you have any queries, feel free to get in touch.
Yeah. And what would you say to the people that struggle to believe that full recovery is possible?
They don't have to believe it yet. They just have to do the next thing that they need to do. I always say to people, it's kind of like I'm the tour guide and we've gone to Everest. It's my job to look at the mountain. It's your job to look at the boots on the ground in front of you, right? We don't want you falling into a crevasse. So you've really got to keep an eye on the next little journey that we're doing. It's my job to accumulatively put all of those steps together to get us to that ultimate outcome. They don't have to believe it. We just work on keeping them curious and keeping them open and just thinking about what's possible. There's a great writing assignment that we do very early on called A Day in My Life Recovered. And people will say to me, Mia, it's week 2. How am I meant to know what that's going to look like? And the assignment is not about knowing, it's about being curious. Eating disorders think so rigidly. They think in these little narrow terms. And what we're first doing is just opening up that spectrum. What is possible, as opposed to, you recover and everything's going to be terrible. Okay, eating disorder can think that. What else could be possible? Let's just start from that premise. So people don't have to believe in full recovery or believe that full recovery is possible for them until they're getting there. It's just about, let's do the next possible thing. And all those little steps are going to add up to that outcome. It's sort of like, people will come to me and say, Mia, I want to work on intuitive eating. And my answer is always, we don't really work on intuitive eating. All the work that we do leads to that outcome quite naturally. We have people who just suddenly start saying, oh, I felt like this and I ate it. I wanted to try this and I did, and I didn't have any anxiety and I was still hungry. So I had some more. It isn't really a goal we set as much as it is just a side effect of all this work that we're putting in with our goals and our coping mechanisms and changing how we talk to ourselves. Full recovery is similar. It is a side effect of all of your hard work and these specific little steps that you're taking. So just be open. That's all that we ask of you. Be open and be curious.
Yeah, yeah. So Mia, how can people find you?
There's a few different places. You can find me on YouTube under What Mia Did Next. You just search What Mia Did Next over there, or What Mia Did Next on Instagram. Beyondbodycoach.com is the business website where you can find all our information about what we do, the services we provide, the coaches who are in our practice, and the contact form is there at the bottom of the website. If you would like to work with anybody in our practice, there may be a wait list for some, but like I said earlier, we work to get people connected to a coach as quickly as possible. And I think that's pretty much everywhere that I exist on the internet at the moment. For now.
That's a good selection. And finally, what would you say to somebody in the depths of their eating disorder?
There is so much hope. There is so much hope. We can see that in all the different demonstrations of what recovery and being recovered can look like. And I want everyone to have a taste of what is possible. And even if you feel like you can't connect to that hope for yourself, my question to you in those moments would be my request of you would be to pick someone who you really, really care about, who you really love and care about, and imagine that they're telling you that recovery is not possible for them, that they are not capable of it, or it's not worth it. How might you think about that differently if it was somebody else? How might you view that thinking differently? Would you hear that it was absolutely impossible for them, or that maybe that is a symptom of the eating disorder? Maybe that thinking is actually something to overcome. That is a huge part of the work that we do, is shifting the perspective of our thoughts. The thought that you have, put that in the mouth of a loved one as if they are saying it to you. How do you maybe view it differently when it's being said by them versus when you're saying it to yourself? So even when you can't have hope for yourself, there are so many ways to access, like I said earlier, that curiosity and remaining open, and to meet yourself where you are. That's a big part of what Carolyn teaches to us as coaches. Is it's our job to meet people where they are and to have compassion for where they are and to be honest with them about what it's going to take to get to where they want to go. And that's your job with yourself too, to have compassion, to be honest with yourself, and to meet yourself where you are. Do what you can right now without overwhelming yourself with the process. You don't have to do everything today. What is the next thing that's possible? Give that a try. See how you go.
Yeah. That's excellent. That's very helpful for people to hear that. And what are your future goals?
Make it through the pandemic. Obviously, to continue to get as much help to as many people as possible. So to continue expanding the business and the services that we offer. At the moment, we do one-to-one coaching, group coaching, workshops when we're running them, and one-off booster calls for people looking for some one-off inspiration and motivation, and maybe some skill sets that they can adopt. But there's so many other things that I'm wanting to bring to the business, COVID permitting, retreats, etc., that we're going to be introducing this year. Personally, is just to enjoy as much of, our loved ones as we can, to see relatives I haven't seen for a long time, to hopefully get on a plane at some point and connect with friends I haven't seen forever, trying to keep my thinking a little bit more short term and a little bit more achievable. But just most importantly, to put some time and energy and effort into self-care and just navigating these slightly weird times as best I can, I suppose.
Yeah. And then maybe a possibility in the future is to set up your own retreat.
Yeah, that is the plan. That is the plan this coming year. So we have a property, and retreats will probably, like I said, COVID permitting, be introduced around October, November of this year.
Oh, so you already have a property?
Yes.
Oh, I love it. How exciting.
Yeah. South coast of New South Wales, Mollymook will be the first location. But again, I'm just not wanting to put too much out into the universe. No inquiries, please. None of that's concrete, because we just don't necessarily know what the end of this year is going to look like. But when it's possible, just continue to provide as much support to people as we can in a few different forms.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. So a lot of exciting plans for the future. Oh, I love it. Well, thank you so much, Mia, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been, I don't know, it's just been a dynamic chat. Insightful,
I hope that people get something out of it.
Passionate, inspiring talk. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, spending your morning with me.
Yeah, thank you, Mia. So that's all for today's episode of Bulimia Sucks. And thank you to everybody for listening. And if you didn't know, check out my book called Bulimia Sucks, which is on Amazon, to learn many different helpful techniques, patterns to begin to break through your bulimic behavior. And so thank you for listening, and I look forward to chatting with you in the next episode.